Hi there, and thank you for joining our webinar specifically for cold stores, in which we share more about the possibilities to streamline and simplify your logistic processes. My name is Colette Kuppens, responsible for the marketing activities at Boltrix and your webinar host for today. During this webinar, we will discuss, among other things, the challenges that the cold chain logistics is confronted with. Think of quality and temperature checks, increasing requirements regarding product safety, and the pressure to accurately register all your processes. In addition, you must continue to meet the changing requirements and wishes of your customers. All in all, that can put a lot of pressure on your organization. That is why we show you how you can get more work done in less time. For example, I will show you how you can effortlessly streamline your processes, how you can easily perform quality checks, and how you can record all data in the stock, from tracing items to how you should carry out the procedures. But more about that in a bit. Let's start with what is happening in cold chain logistics. One of the most important challenges today is change. Change itself is nothing new, increasing competition, a greater demand for information from your customers, new technologies. Change is a continuous process. We have seen most of these changes coming from afar, even disruptive developments from players like Amazon, Uber, and Tesla, which can turn the entire market at once with the help of new technologies and concepts, can be foreseen long before they happen. Yet, no one could have foreseen the forced changes caused by the corona crisis. No slow or predictable innovations, but sudden and extensive developments in which you as a logistics service provider have to find your way, whether you like it or not. On top of that, you must continue to meet the technological requirements and wishes of your customers. An example of this is Friesland Campina, which works closely with logistics service providers for the transport and storage of their goods. When they migrated to the latest version of SAP, they also upgraded their way of communicating with partners. As a result, they no longer accepted file transfers. Logistics service providers that were unable to communicate with synchronous web service were no longer chosen to be their logistics partners. And this applies not only to the logistics service providers, but also to the software suppliers. One of the logistics service provider changed its WMS and software supplier because the current supplier was not able to work with this new technology. Of course, you want to avoid that. In short, as a logistics service provider, the most important thing is that you're agile, giving you an advantage over your competitor. In addition, you must be able to rely on a software supplier that also moves along with developments in the field of IT. That's what we will cover during this webinar. And if we now look at the trends specifically in cold chain logistics, we see that the corona crisis has caused a huge growth in online purchases. An increasing number of online orders for supermarkets, for example, equals more fulfillment services for logistics service providers. Customers are increasingly placing targeted orders, as supermarkets know better how much they need to purchase and when they want to receive the goods. As a result, the focus is increasingly shifting to order picking, and you're increasingly dealing with just-in-time delivery. As a logistics service provider, you must be able to respond to this change. And finally, we see that automation of processes continues to increase. For example, 41% of the companies that are a member of GCCA invested in more automation, and not without reason. Because with the right tools in hand, you can process larger volumes with minimal actions, and you can get more work done in less time. Well, that makes a difference, because then you can focus on other things. For example, how you can meet the wishes of your customers. What are the quick wins? We are actually talking about 5 topics. Control quality and temperature checks without administration frustration. I will soon show how you can effortlessly perform quality checks without any administrative frustration. A second quick win is recording product data, such as the expiry date obligation, but also the way in which you have to carry out the procedures. Think of a temperature measurement on the inbound or outbound document or breakage report. In addition, products must always be traceable, for example on the basis of batch number or expiry date. I will therefore show you how you can guarantee full traceability in a moment. You can also save a lot of time by integrating your communication with customers and customs through EDI. And finally, to measure is to know. Of course, you want to be able to identify which customers are profitable and which cost money. How this exactly works, we will dive into the software itself. You can now see the home screen of our WMS, and this screen can be fully configured to the user who's working with the system. There are a lot of possibilities in our software because we do not only offer WMS. For example, if I go to my settings, you can see that right now I have a WMS order processor role, but there are multiple roles to choose from. If you, for example, work with containers coming into your cold store, there's also ocean freight functionality available. Or another possibility is to create an account role, because it's also possible to manage your financial administration in the application. So different roles are available, and depending on your role, the home screen will look a certain way. So the application you can access via the browser, so you can work with it anywhere, any place, anytime, as long as you have an internet connection. Well, in the role center, you can see here 3PL Dynamics, which is the company I'm in. So suppose you're working for the company Kloosterboer, then it will say Kloosterboer Delta Terminal, or it can say Eurofrigo. Well, and here we have the main menu with master data, which are the contacts, customers, vendors, etc., etc. And here you can also see batches, which is of course also very important. Here we have in the main menu the documents such as receipts, shipments, perhaps you transfer stock from customer A to customer B. Then we have a customer transfer documents, or perhaps you're making movements in the warehouse or from warehouse 1 to warehouse 2. Well, then this can be realized via transfer documents. In addition, you can also see air freight and ocean freight functionalities, and depending on the wishes you set for the application, we can create this main menu. Then we also have a small sub-menu, which are the most frequently used menu items. So mostly we are talking about customers, customer items, receipts, shipments, etc. And if I now click on customers, we actually see our master data of the customers. So we are at the moment in a sales environment, so don't be alarmed by all the outstanding items. It's a sales environment and we do not actually invoice these customers. But now if I go to an example customer, such as Nieuwe Zandpoort, we can immediately see the details of this customer on the right-hand side. We can see there are 23 customer items in the master data. The customer has 71 pallets with us. The receipt and shipment are 23 and 5. And regarding data integration, which I will come back to later, well, at the moment there are no messages pending. Then if I now open the customer card, we see the master data of this particular customer. There are different fields available. So we see here general, address and contact, transport warehouse, etc. We see the customer name, the credit limit, and on the right-hand side, you can also see the outstanding items, which are, please note, only possible if you also use the finance administration in our application. So if you use an external package, which is absolutely possible as well, for example, if you use Exact Online or AFAS, it's not an obligation to go to Dynamics Finance with us. No, you can simply use your own accounting, but in that case, you cannot see the details here. They will not be correctly. Then we have address and contact, and here it is very important to record email addresses. We can also register multiple contacts and multiple email addresses because ultimately the intention is to simplify your administration and save time in, for example, transferring email activities. So we can generate emails directly from the WMS application. As an example, I will show you this later with a damage report or with a problem report to a customer. Well, the most important thing on this customer card is how we deal with this customer from a warehouse technical point of view. So here you can see there's an invoice period and there is a certain SSCC number series. So at Baldrix, we love scanning, so we like to record the number series that your customer uses in our application. But in the end, it comes down to batch numbers. And you can decide here, can we generate those batch numbers or do we have to take them over? So the external party number, are those mandatory? Then we click on these two and we take over the batch numbers from your customer. And the same options you have for weight, production date and expiration date. And should the expiration date be chronological? For example, we receive items with best before date in a year, and next week we receive items from actually last week. Well, is that allowed, or should we get a warning or maybe even an error message? Well, all those things in terms of expiration date can be recorded on the customer card. Well, then we have the option attribute here, because as you may already know, Qualtrics offers standard generic software for the logistics industry and also to cold stores. This does not mean, however, that if you're missing fields on the customer card as master data field, that it is then also unavailable. Because we can name certain fields for this customer, for example, because you're used to using them in your process. If that is the case, we could then name a characteristic field such as logic over here to the specific field that you would like to use in your process. And if we now go to the right, then we see the logistics details here. And we can see that there are 23 customer items. And when I click on that, then we see the master data. So the inventory list of the customer items. And these are then all the customer items that this customer could have in stock. We have recorded them once as master data, but we also see the number of inventory pallets that are actually available. So with this item here, there is no stock, but with the Angus beef, we see that 10 pallets are in stock with over 52,000 packages. Well, if we now go to the customer item card, we see it has the same look and feel in terms of structure, only now we're not on the customer card, but on the customer item card of Angus beef. And here we can also add an image of the product. And if you do so, then you will also be able to show images of the product to the order picker via Android scanning. Then you can see here we have the internal WMS customer item number. So the WMS generates its own unique WMS item number. And here there is also the external customer item number, which can be the number of your customer. Well, why is this combination important? This customer item, 205, will never change in the future, but this external number may change for the same item by your customer. Well, then the tracing is still guaranteed also towards the past because we have not changed the number 205. And we can change the external number independently. So the procedures in the WMS will mainly be linked to the internal customer item number, but we do include the external item number. Well, then if I go to the classification tab, we see various fields that are actually important. If we're also going to take care of customs declarations from the application, there is that possibility. You can trigger a declaration in NCTS or export declaration in NCTS directly from the WMS to the Dutch customs. But most importantly, actually on this customer item card, is the processing fields. Here we are actually going to describe how we want to deal with this item in the WMS in the warehouse. So we say here the condition at receipt is frozen, and it can also be fresh, it can be labeled, it can be unlabeled, etc., etc. It's all depending on your process. So let's say with receipt it's frozen, it enters on the block pallet, and the condition is frozen again, and it also exits on the block pallet. But of course there are different possibilities there. Depending on the packages types you use, we can record these as master data. Well, then we also have different recipes. A recipe at receipt. For example, you have to think of value-added services. For instance, unlabeled products are coming in, and the recipe at receipt will be that we have to label the items before we store them. Well, that could be a recipe at receipt with which a service is also invoiced directly to your customer. We have the same with shipments. Perhaps the customer would like a red ribbon around it. Then we can say that the recipe when the product is released is to tie a red ribbon around the pallet. Well, we will then organize that process technically in the scanning process, whereby the invoicing to the customer takes place directly, perhaps for the ribbon and also for the activities involved. Well, then we have different calculation methods. We have a shipping carrier calculation method. In other words, an order picker picks 10 pallets, but what is the transport unit in the end? So the truck can have 33 pallets. I pick 10 pallets. Are there already 10 pallets in that truck? Based on the item units and the dimensions, it could be possible that those 10 pallets will eventually become only 2 transport pallets. That is what is meant by the shipping carrier calculation method. An order pick calculation method means that we are picking roll containers. So we fill a roll container or a pallet or block pallet, and when is that pallet full? So we calculate pallets there, say, to actually full order picking pallets. In the end, you can go so far as to say that the result must not be picked by one person, but by several persons. Then we say, okay, 1 pallet per order picker. Well, it all has to do with one assignment. So there's a lot of possibilities there. Then we also have the condition at storage. You may have a certain cycle counting method. So here it says quarterly. So this item is counted every quarter. And this is automatically triggered by the system. We also have other choices there, so counting inventory 0 or inventory of at least 20 or whatever cycle counting methods you have agreed upon with your customer. Well, then we come to an important part, the reservation of the item. So how are we going to reserve it? This item is reserved for shipment on the expiration date. We can also say on the date of receipt or production date. Then we have a margin of 1 week, which means that the best before date can be a week too early or a week later. Then we have 2 reservation methods. We have a bulk reservation and an order pick reservation or replenishment. The bulk actually means that when picking from a rack, we don't have a picking lane. So we pick the goods directly from a rack from a location. And replenishment means that we have a picking lane on which all kinds of replenishment activities must be created based on outbound activities. Well, there are, of course, all kinds of different methods that can be thought of and applied here. So there's a lot of functionality there. Well, then we come to item tracking. The tracing here is done by batch number and per item. So you can determine what is mandatory, not only at the customer level on the customer card, like we've seen before, but we can also do it separately per item. And we also have a field available for dangerous goods, but for now that's not so important. So in addition, as we have just seen on the customer card, we have again the attribute fields on the customer item card as well. So again, if you're missing any fields, then we can rename some of the characters here into a field that you are missing. And well, now let's have a look at the details of this item right over here. I can see how many packages there are in storage, but I'm mainly concerned with the 10 carriers. So I have 10 carriers in stock. And if I zoom in on this, then I see that those are the carriers with the carrier numbers, and I can also see what the status of those carriers is and where they are. So these are located in the Amersfoort location, which already indicates that we can record multiple locations in the application. And they are in a certain bulk location. And if we then go to the tracing, I can say, okay, this pallet I want to see from this pallet, I want to see the entries. And when I click on ledger entries, I see exactly what happened to the pallet. So this pallet arrived on 20th of January. It was an inbound one. It arrived in Amersfoort at location number 17 and has batch number 6. And it concerns a receipt with this document number. Ultimately, there was also an outbound flow from this pallet, and this concerns the document number 39, and 15 cartons had been loaded. So this is basically a quick action to see what happened to a specific carrier in terms of tracing. You can also go to the carrier card, and when we are on the carrier itself, then again we see the inbound here below each other. So we see the contents of the carrier, but the most important thing is that we can change this carrier in status, because perhaps this carrier is damaged or needs to be quarantined, or there's another reason for this carrier to be blocked. We can create that through this status transition, so that this carrier is no longer available for shipment. Now, if I go to the batches in terms of tracing, then I am here in my inventory list. So this provides an overview of the stock of this customer in US onport. Then if I go to actions and I click on navigate, then it shows me what I have in stock at the main level. So what has happened to this specific product. So not at the carrier level, but the product and all the actions that lay below it. Well, then we see that there were 6 inbounds, 1 outbound, and also a posted receipt. We see there are 6 batches, and we can see the indicator entry. So, which means there were 13 weighings. And depending on the type of scale you use in your cold store, we already have connections with Mettler and Ravas to take over the weights into our application. And we can do so at receipt, shipment, and we even have the option to have the Ravas scale on the pick card, so that the packages can be weighed from the order pick, so that it can determine if the employee already picked enough packages, yes or no. If we now look at the batches, we see that Angus beef in stock consists of 6 batches. Those have these batch numbers, and I'm also able to see very quickly what the entries actually were for a batch. So here I see that twice something has come in on this batch number, 1 time something went out on this batch number, and here I have the option to even zoom into the batch number or to see the related documents. So if I now click on document, I open the outbound document, and so via tracing, I'm actually in the original shipment document. Is there another way to trace? Yes, of course, because you can actually navigate from any angle with the navigate button. But another way is through our reports. And our reports consist of different sub-areas. So here you can see general, inventory, services package, but right now I'm talking about inventory. And when I click on inventory here, I have the reports that we can print, and here I also have a batch tracking report. So if I choose this report and I say print, and I have to click here print again, I can go here. Then I have a filter option here to say which customer it should be from. So it should be from New Zandpoort. And I can say the item number, and that was the Angus beef. Then I say print, and the report is generated, and I get a report that I could send to the customer to show him, okay, track batches based on the batch number we chose or based on all batch numbers there are. So you can also quickly offer this option to your customer. For now, let's go back to the home screen again, because here we also have an action menu. And the action menu actually means the actions that you can trigger yourself. So I can create a new receipt or shipment. I can create a fall order. And also I have tasks here. Well, under tasks, there are basically 3 main tasks. We have inventory journal. We can use this to trigger an inventory of the warehouse itself or a part of the warehouse. We can also create a transfer journal. For example, when I want to free up a zone for new goods coming in, or I have a warehouse journal. And this is used if you want to group all shipment orders to a specific zip code to trigger all orders at once. So, for example, all orders for a zip code that is located in Germany. and Germany leaves at 3 o'clock, then you would like the order pickers not to be busy with shipments for the Netherlands, but for shipments for Germany. Well, those are things you can do with the warehouse journal. And you can also say, I'm going to work with a certain trip structure. And to show you, if we go to trips, then I see here all the trips that have been generated, and trips actually mean that we can link receipts and shipments to a trip. So this trip number 11 is linked to receipt number 53. The order is booked and it comes at a certain arrival time. Of course, we're in a sales environment, so we see all their data, but in the end, I can say by choosing this trip and processing it that I want to generate movements, or I trigger all shipment orders from this screen because the trip is registered with a certain time. So also from this angle, we could trigger activities that lead to the outbound activities. Well, then if we look at the workload here, we see stacking indicators, and these stacking indicators actually show me what stage the activities are at. So the receipts here are defined to status from confirmed to invoice ready, but there are different possibilities to define the indication stacks. In the end, these are just filters which you can define, all with the aim of giving you direct insight when you start up the system via the web browser, that you can see, okay, what are my activities? Well, there are 9 scanned, 123 to be invoiced, I still have 9 picks open, replenishment is 0, but I still have 26 on the dock that need to be put away. Well, and if we click on such a tile to, for example, confirm something, then we come directly to the receipt, which are located behind that filter. So if I now make a new receipt for Nieuwes on Board, actually, you can see a button here to open in Excel, which basically means that everything you see in list form can be exported to Excel. And from Excel, you can edit the Excel file yourself and forward it to a customer. So again, there is no cut and paste needed to generate lists for your customer in Excel. No, we can import and export from and to Excel with this button. But if we then go to the receipt document, we see that our customer Nieuwes on Board is mentioned here, but right now it's about the order type. This order type determines how we will deal with the inbound process for this customer in the system. So based on all the master data that is available, we also have different order types. So you can also choose for return or bonded warehouse, which we name depending on the processes that take place in your warehouse. And this order type has a certain workflow. And to show you, here we see the status log, but for now it's all about the template, because here we define the standard for the order type. So through which steps does my receipt process actually go into the system? So administratively speaking, because in the end, all the steps that we mention here are office administration steps. So order comes in, then it's confirmed, it's scanned, and then we add the services. And then we will determine together with you as a customer, okay, the steps have been defined. What automation do I want from the WMS if the inbound document goes from status 10 to status 20, for example? So here we see that there are 6 linked processes. So I will briefly show you those linked processes. We see that from status 10 to status 20, the system will automatically email something, perhaps a confirmation to your customer. He is also going to create detail lines. In other words, 33 or 26 blockers come in. You just put 26 blocks of Angus beef in the receipt line, and the system then creates the 26 separate carriers itself. Warehouse activities are created. In other words, the 26 loose pallets have to be put away, so put away tasks are created. A document is being printed, so you may want to print receipt document with inbound stickers, which then will be printed automatically. You don't have to do anything manually. We will do another credit check. of course, once again, provided you use the Dynamics Finance, then we can also apply this trigger. If the customer has too many outstanding items, I will receive a warning from the system. We will, of course, still receive the goods because we want to be able to fall back on something, but you did have the warning. Well, and we do a data integration, so perhaps also towards the customer's ERP package or SAP package, to let him know in his system that we have processed the inbound order, or this data integration could also be a confirmation message. I will show you the message types later, but it could be a receipt pre-notification and the confirmation of the receipt. And here, actually, in this part, is the flexibility of our system. So you no longer need customization because ultimately all the customers of Boltrix ensure that these processes are continuously expanded and are captured in a function library from which our consultants set up your processes. And if I now go back to the original receipt document, then you can see here the linked status steps. And these status steps save you a lot of time in administration or also double work, because we can easily create a damage report or send an order confirmation, and they are then triggered manually. So in addition to the automized part, these are also semi-automatized steps. So it's basically a task list, and it gives an overview of which tasks you have to perform in status 40 scanned. And if I click here on send order confirmation, then we will see that we are actually going to send an email to the customer. So here the email address of the customer will appear if the master data is filled in correctly. The subject is filled automatically, and we see an email template here. And would you also like to send an attachment with this email, then we can also configure that attachments are being sent. So again, this is a saving in the administration because of course the employee does not have to go to Outlook separately and copy paste and so on. No, he sends an order confirmation of the document directly to the customer, or he can send a damage report, or etc., etc. So we have the standard order type here. I've showed you the statuses and the workflow configuration options that are available. And then I have the lines here. And the lines consist of the customer item number, the external customer item number, batch number, the description of the good. We can see here there are 2 blockers with 160 cartons, and there is a condition recorded on this item. Because of course we also work with conditions. And the conditions in this case is that the blast time must be at least 1 hour upon receipt. So we have agreed with the customer that a condition is applicable for this specific item. And the condition is that when this item comes in, the goods must remain in the blast freezer for 1 hour. Well, in addition, there are of course many more conditions to consider, and again, depending on your processes, we can link them to this item. Another convenient functionality is these links here. You can see 5 folders, and these 5 folders, internal, external, photos, POD, and various documents, actually mean that we can link documents to this order number 92. So perhaps we send an internal mail or external mail linked to this specific order. Then you can drag the email to this folder, and then the WMS will create a link towards your mailbox to connect the email to this specific order. And the folder photos, I can also show you right now, because you are probably also very curious what the scanner looks like. So here we see our Android scanner, which can also be accessed via the browser. And there are a lot of possibilities available, also in terms of process control for your warehouse. So imagine I'm a scan employee, and the scan employee in the warehouse logs in and he sees this menu. The scan employee says, okay, I'm going to start with my inbound. Then there is a second menu where he can choose what kind of receipt do I have. Well, I have one with a pre-notification, number 4. I look up my inbound order, and just as an example, I pick this order, and then we see there are 2 pallets that need to be processed. So that is the scan menu for the scanning procedure. Once again, you can configure the scan app according to your scanning procedure. But also important for your logistics processes is, of course, how can I guarantee the quality? And to show you this, I will log in, but this time as a different employee. And now we can see basically the same app platform, but now it's configured as a quality app. So here we see an intake check, outtake check, pallet exchange, or create incident, or register damage. And given the time, if we now stick to this intake check, I click on that, then as a warehouse employee, I can perform a quality check. So I pick our received order from newest on port from the list, and then I can choose to either register damage or to continue with my quality check. Are the pallets in a good condition? Okay. Is the driver present? Okay. And yeah, these questions can of course be extended if desired. Well, then here I have the possibility to also take a photo, perhaps of the trailer, the truck, or the load, which will then be automatically linked to the folder here. So photos that we take here with the app are automatically linked to this folder in the WMS. And if I continue our quality check, we arrive at the measurements. So from this good, I need to measure the temperature. We have a temperature device because every warehouse employee has his own temperature meter, which can be noted here. Well, then let's say the pallet is minus 17 degrees, and here we would scan the barcode of the pallet. And that's how we then can perform temperature controls. And the warehouse employee can continue with the signature of the driver, who agrees and can then sign. Then I click on send, and it will be uploaded to the receipt document. Now we're done. And what I would like to show you next is then, of course, the services. Because in the end, we have a lot to do with services which we want to invoice to our customer. So for this, we have a WMS contract list. For example, here I have the contract of a customer newest on port. We can see the validity here from and to. And this concerns the receipt and shipment that you want to invoice, perhaps also of all activity. We have a document type that is applicable. So when I click on the receipt here, I have these service agreements with my customer. So inbound cost per pallet, storage cost per pallet, packaging and labeling, adding logo, etc., etc. And there are countless service numbers to choose from. Our system then calculates based on a unit price, base amount, quantity, and chosen unit of measure. So in the end, this again saves you having to manually calculate the invoice to your customer, because the system will do it for you. Well, then if I go back to the home screen once again, because of course you will also be ISS certified, and I would like to show you what functionality we have there. So I will go to the receipt document, and here I can trigger an action. And an action could be that I want to create a request. When I create a request, the WMS creates a new document, and that is then linked, in this case with the ID number 9, to the receipt number 22. And here I can say, okay, I have a problem, a cause, or I'm looking for an action. Well, let's say I have a problem, then what is the problem? The goods received are damaged, the goods have not been delivered, well, etc., etc. I can again link a photo to it, and I can email it directly to my customer. So I can send an internal email, perhaps to the quality manager, who also maintains ISO or IFS. And I can directly send an email to my customer with which I have agreed SLAs. So I'll follow when I've made the request, and will I get a feedback on it? Well, this is again useful for your sales or business developer or service manager who is in contact with the customer, because they can, of course, take advantage of the fact that the customer never responds. Well, then the last functionality I want to show you is the Power BI dashboard, because we're also able to gain insight into your data with regards to your KPIs. Because Boltrix has developed various Power BI dashboards for this. They have been developed for small and medium-sized companies specifically, because maybe you do not have the knowledge and capacity to build reports yourself. Well, we have created standard reports for this so that you can still gain insight into the customers in a certain way. So, for example, what does my customer do? An important KPI is, of course, the storage days, because you may have agreed prices with the customer based on the turnover rate. And when you see that this customer, it has 4 batches in stock, but his stock is in the cold store for 355 days on average. Well, I'm not happy about that because I want receipts, I want shipments, and I don't want storage. So in this way, Power BI can provide a clear insight into your data. And another example is location capacity. So how much empty space do I still have in my cold store? Because of course every square meter costs money. I hope that this demo could give you, in a nutshell, some insights into our system, the looks and feel, and how it is configured and constructed. And that said, brings me to the end of this webinar. Briefly summarized, what we showed during this webinar is how to effortlessly perform quality and temperature checks, easily record batch numbers, production dates and expiry data, and track goods throughout the process. In addition, we showed how you can gain insight into the earnings per customer with the help of Power BI, and that you can automate communication to a large extent with EDI. If you would like to learn more about this, we have a specific webinar available. And if you are curious about the stories and practical tips from our customers, you can take a look at our website. Here you can read, for example, how and why Rosla Logistics and Samskip chose the Boltrix branch standard. Or you can watch the video of Lineage Logistics in which Peter Breising talks about their choice. That was our webinar for today. Thank you very much for joining our webinar, and we hope that the content was interesting and valuable to you. And for more information about our WMS solution, please visit our website. And if you have any questions, please contact us at marketing@boltrix.nl and we will get back to you as soon as possible. For now, thank you again, and we hope to see you during our next webinar.